Hello, welcome to Postcolonial Space. This is my series on animated theory videos where I provide you brief videos using animation. Today I'll talk about structuralism and some of its major points and major aspects. So, historical background. Ferdinand Saussure's course in general linguistics was the book that rejects mimetic theory of language, in which discussion of language must include reference in real world. For structural view of language, langue is emphasized over parole, which is an utterance. The sign is a composite of a signifier and signified, and Saussure ignores the real world referent. Meaning in any language is relational. In language, there are only differences. And he also proposed general theory of signs, semiology, to cover all kinds of sign systems. And then Charles Sanders Peirce, a logician, American philosopher, he proposed semiotics as a study of how meaning occurs. Now, here are some of the assumptions. To know something, you need to understand the underlying system, the structure that makes meaning possible. This is true for language as well as any other signifying system. In applying structuralist thinking to literature, we would assume literature contains a structure from which individual texts emerge. Very often, we would be less concerned with the individual text on its own terms and more interested in the ways in which it participates in a larger system. For example, Vladimir Propp studies Russian fairy tales and isolated 31 actions or functions in the fairy tales. Taken together, these comprise the structure of the fairy tale, and we can trace this structure in pretty much all fairy tales. You can assume whether it's a Cinderella story or whether it's a quest story. Other assumptions. His contemporary Viktor Shklovsky was another Russian formalist. He defined literariness as a function of defamiliarization. In other words, we understand that a text is literary when we see how it departs from expectations. Our expectations are generated by our understanding of conventional form. Shklovsky also distinguished between story, the chronological sequence, and the plot, the actual arrangement of incidents in the telling of the story. Now, Eagleton, of course, complicates this idea. More assumptions. Todorov has also studied the function of symbolism in literature. He has also mapped out the structure of a given genre, the fantastic, and fitted particular text within that generic structure. Gerard Guenet has studied the way time is represented in narrative, the many possibilities of temporal marking within the structure of narrative. He then applies these findings in relation to particular texts. Jonathan Culler adds a new twist, include reading conventions that form part of the system. Authorial intention is not of any interest, for he or she too is conditioned by a structure of meaning. Structuralists are not concerned with producing a correct interpretation. They are more concerned with how meaning is generated. As with new critics, less concerned with historical context, and treats literature almost as if it were an organized science. So the methodology is focus on structure, showing how the text reifies that structure, look for rules that govern interpretive choices, identify codes, identify and discuss significance of binary opposition, since different generates meaning in any semiotic system. So you mostly study the structure still and not just an individual sign. If you look at the pictures at the bottom, these are structures. The meaning is dependent upon knowing the whole structure. There are obviously critiques of structuralism. In any theory that focuses on system rather than individual text, sometimes we lose sense of the uniqueness of a text. On the other hand, this approach forces us to think about how we make sense of things. It gives us a vocabulary that helps us describe the operations we make. Knowing the underlying rules to the game better helps us to find meaning in convincing manner. Finally, gaining awareness of how codes operate to guide our reactions, we are better able to resist them if we choose. So overall, if we just focus on structure, here is my source. It's from the internet, and I will post a link, of course, in the description. And then, as always, thanks for watching. And thanks for being a part of this. And as always, what I say at the end, peace and love.